Let's talk about radio controlled transmitters. This was one of the hardest things I found to understand. There were people who could help me, but they knew bits about transmitters, but not everything. Mainly because they'd set them up a long time ago, and I guess had kind of forgotten about how they worked. So let me just run through how my FLYSKY i6 works, which is what I use to drive the boat. First of all, you can see it's got a number of switches across the top. It's got two transmitter arms. This one I use for sheeting. You can see it's got no spring on it. And this arm I use for the rudder, and you can see it centralizes so that the boat, if I let it go, the boat sails in a straight line. So the important points to note are the sheeting aileron, this button here, which is for very fine adjustment to my sheeting system. And if when I'm out on the water the rudder isn't quite central, I can use this fine-tuning button to adjust the rudder one way or the other to make the boat sail in a straight line. And it's one of the things I do when I do my initial checkup when I get on the water. So to turn it on, you have to push all these switches up to the top, like so, and you have to have this arm all the way down. It's just the way the product is set up. You can then turn it on and you see your screen lights up, and I'm now in a position where I can actually operate these things, and if my receiver was on, the rudder and the sheeting system would work at the other end. So a little bit about the menu. The first trick is when the screen goes dark like that, press once to turn the screen on, and then if you press and hold it down, you get the menu. And we'll first look at the setup menu. So if I press the down button, we get the setup menu, click OK, and then I get the following menu. And I'll just highlight the ones that we're interested in. First one is endpoints, and then we're interested in the display, sub-trim, and dual rate exponential. And they're the only settings that I'm really concerned about. So what do each of these do? If I scroll up to endpoints, the endpoints basically allow you to adjust the maximum extremity of a servo movement or a winch movement. So with channel 1, which is my rudder, I want that to be 100% end to end because I adjust it somewhere else. Channel 3 is the sheeting. If I go down, channel 3 there is the sheeting extremities, and this one's really important because I use this to adjust my sheeting for sailing to windward and running dead downwind. So when I'm running dead downwind, I know that 69% will get my boom just touching the shroud, leaning on the shroud, and 93% is for my A-rig, and the boom will be a few millimeters off the center line. And that's all you need to think about with endpoints. Now, if you do make an adjustment and you want to save it, you have to press and hold the cancel button. That switches the light on, press and hold, and that saves the settings. If you just press cancel once and let go, you just go back up the menu. The next thing you can see is the display button, and this is quite useful if you have a problem. So this is my rudder arm here, and you can see as I move it from side to side, you can see the arm, and you can see that the arm is exactly centered on the screen here. I had a problem with a wire that was touching the gimbal on the other side, and quite often I'd be sailing and I would centralize the arm, and I would get a right hand setting, and sometimes it would switch over to a left hand setting, and it was caused by this wire moving under the gimbal. It took me a while to realize that it was a fault underneath, and I took the cover off and I was able to find the wire and relocate it, and then the problem went away. So just bear that in mind in case you ever have a problem with your rudder behaving in an erratic manner. If these things wear out, by the way, you can replace the whole unit. So this also shows channel 3. It shows my sheeting. And it's just, for me, I just use a linear adjustment from end to end. And that's all you need to know on the display. So if we cancel that, we'll come back to that later. We go down to auxiliary channels we don't have to worry about. Subtrim. This is a bit like the super sensitive adjustment for the sheeting and the rudder. I can move the rudder to the left or to the right using this subtrim. So when my boat's out on the water, if I can't get it back to me and adjust the thing, then I will use this to get the boat sailing in an exact straight line. And I do that just by sailing the boat away from me or towards me with the sails just drawing gently, looking to see if the boat's going in a straight line. Once it's in a straight line, I can just save the setting and on I go. And then lastly, the last setting is the dual rate exponential setting. Now what's this about? If I just bear with me. So channel 1 is my rudder setting. It's currently set up so that if I move the stick to the left or right a small amount, the rudder hardly moves. It gives me a very fine calibration on the setting. As I move the stick more and more to the end, then the rudder moves more and more. So if I look at this graph, so let me just get a pointer. So if this line represents the rudder movement and this line represents the joystick movement, you can see if I move the joystick almost up to 50%, I hardly get any movement on the rudder. So when I'm sailing in a straight line, I can adjust the boat very gradually and not oversteer. If I want to oversteer, then I just go hard left or hard right, and the boat will move for me. Be careful with this though, because what I did originally was I had my exponential set at +100. So here you can see if you set the exponential to 0, you get a completely linear movement on the rudder. So it moves the same amount as I move the joystick right across the range. When I first set the boat up, I only thought there was a positive exponential. So I thought, that's fine. I move the, put the exponential on, I'll be fine. Not realizing that this is the rudder movement, this is the stick movement. So if I move the stick a small amount, I get a massive movement on the rudder. And I've been sailing like that for the best part of 9 months, I guess. So silly me. And I have to thank the guys at Emsworth for making me look at the settings again and realizing my mistake. So we'll put that back to where it should be, like so. And I'll go for 100%. You can experiment. You can reduce the amount of exponential setting you have if that's too sensitive in the middle. The other thing to look at is the rate. So the rate is the amount of travel that you have on the rudder. So if I increase the rate, you'll see here, this is the travel on the rudder. Travel on the rudder increases. Now I sail with this at about 80% because that's what I'm comfortable with. And now I've got the exponential set the correct way. I'll have to find out whether 100% is right or whether it needs to be less. So that, having set those, I can then save that. And if I look down, there are various other settings, but I'm not interested in those. Now, if I go back to the dual rate exponential button, go into that menu. So this is a setting, there's a switch. If you look at this switch, if I press this switch, watch what happens to the settings here. So I have another setting where I can flick the switch, and this is for if I've got a long downwind wind leg, I reduce the amount of rudder movement. So I can sail in a straight line, adjust the course, but do it very gently. And that stops me oversteering on a downwind leg. And all you have to do is flick the switch down, put in your settings here, and you'll note I've got the exponential setting, the exponential rate wrong again. So I'll change that from plus 54 to minus 54. So that says a reasonable amount of movement on the joystick will cause a very small amount of rudder movement, which is what I want when I'm sailing in a straight line. But again, you can adjust and play with those settings as you go along. So I can save that. So now, when I'm sailing, that will be my setting before the start, and probably most of the first beat. This would be my setting on a run, or maybe a reach where it's a steady breeze and I'm sailing in a straight line. And that basically is everything you need to know about using the two channels on a FLYSKY i6. I hope that all makes sense. Any questions, give me a shout on the members forum on the website.